Rick Mahorn. In Game 6 of the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals, tension peaks between the Chicago Bulls and the Detroit Pistons, two teams defined by bruising, physical defense. Rick Mahorn, a 6 feet 10 inches power forward known for anchoring Detroit's front line, shoves Scottie Pippen in the third quarter during a routine rebound scuffle. The act doesn't involve a punch, but officials classify it as hostile and eject Mahorn on the spot. The league later fines him $5,000, a significant penalty for an incident without escalation. Broadcasters replay the push dozens of times, framing it as emblematic of the Pistons' bad boys identity. The fallout leads the NBA to re-examine its policy on flagrant fouls. In the weeks following the series, league officials initiate discussions around unsportsmanlike physicality, ultimately tightening enforcement in the postseason rulebook. The Pistons, without Mahorn's interior presence, dropped the next game, allowing the Bulls to advance and shift the balance of power in the East. Mahorn's ejection becomes a case study in borderline contact and the subjectivity of game management under playoff pressure. The evolving foul standards continue shaping how the NBA regulates physical play in the decade that follows. Charles Barkley. On March 14, 1994, in a regular season game between the Phoenix Suns and Golden State Warriors, Charles Barkley receives a swift ejection for arguing a missed foul call. The incident begins late in the third quarter when Barkley drives into the lane, absorbs contact, and hears no whistle. Frustrated, he turns to the official and shouts, "That's a superstar call." A direct challenge to the perceived inconsistency in officiating standards. The referee immediately issues a technical, and after continued complaints, ejects Barkley from the game. He exits with 16 points and 9 rebounds in just under 28 minutes of play. The NBA fines Barkley $10,000 for the verbal outburst but stops short of suspending him. Because the Suns maintain a comfortable lead and ultimately win by 15, the ejection has minimal effect on the outcome. However, the incident adds fuel to an ongoing debate over star treatment and referee discretion, particularly when enforcing technicals for verbal dissent. Barkley, then a 10-time All-Star and 1993 MVP, becomes a high-profile example of how emotional outbursts can still incur significant penalties, even for marquee players. This controversy reinforces the league's push to tighten control over player conduct without compromising the game's competitive intensity. Latrell Sprewell. In December 1997, Golden State Warriors guard Latrell Sprewell becomes the center of a league-altering controversy after a violent confrontation with head coach P.J. Carlesimo during practice. According to multiple reports, Carlesimo instructs Sprewell to "put a little mustard" on his passes, prompting Sprewell to walk away, then suddenly return and grab the coach by the throat. The choke lasts for roughly 10 seconds before teammates intervene, but Sprewell later returns to throw a punch. Although this incident doesn't occur during a game and doesn't result in an ejection, the league treats it as a defining disciplinary moment. The NBA responds by suspending Sprewell for 68 games without pay, the longest non-drug-related suspension in league history at the time. Golden State immediately voids the remaining 3 years and $24 million on his contract, citing a breach of conduct. In reaction to the national backlash and union appeals, Commissioner David Stern defends the penalty as necessary to protect the league's integrity and workplace standards. The case forces the NBA to implement clearer, stricter personal conduct policies that extend beyond in-game behavior, including how teams handle internal disputes. Sprewell's suspension reshapes how the league enforces discipline and sets a precedent for off-court accountability in modern player management relations. Tim Duncan. In April 2007, the San Antonio Spurs faced the Dallas Mavericks in a regular season game with playoff implications. During a routine dead ball in the third quarter, Tim Duncan, sitting calmly on the bench, laughs after a questionable foul call. Referee Joey Crawford stops play, approaches the sideline, and issues a technical foul. Seconds later, after another visible smirk from Duncan, Crawford ejects him from the game entirely. Duncan, a two-time MVP with 0 personal fouls at that point, never even steps on the floor during the sequence. He later calls it, "the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen," a quote that spreads rapidly across media outlets. The NBA investigates the incident and finds Crawford's actions unjustified. Commissioner David Stern suspends him indefinitely, citing a pattern of overly aggressive officiating and a personal confrontation with Duncan that crosses professional boundaries. Crawford later admits he challenged Duncan to a fight, which further intensifies scrutiny. The league fines Crawford and mandates counseling before reinstatement. Duncan's ejection highlights inconsistencies in officiating power dynamics and sparks renewed debate about referee accountability. The event prompts the league to tighten oversight and adjust how it trains officials to handle perceived disrespect, especially from star players. Ron Artest. In November 2004, during a regular season matchup between the Indiana Pacers and Detroit Pistons, forward Ron Artest becomes the central figure in one of the most infamous incidents in NBA history. With just 45.9 seconds left in the game and Indiana leading 97-82, Artest commits a hard foul on Ben Wallace, who retaliates with a forceful shove. As players converge in a brief scuffle, Artest steps away and lies on the scorer's table to de-escalate. Moments later, a spectator throws a drink that strikes Artest in the chest. He immediately charges into the stands, misidentifies the culprit, and punches a fan. The altercation escalates into a full-scale brawl involving players and spectators on both sides of the court. The fallout is unprecedented. The NBA suspends Artest for the remainder of the season, 86 games including playoffs, the longest non-drug-related suspension in league history. He forfeits approximately $5 million in salary, and 4 other players receive multi-game bans. The game itself ends with only 9 eligible players left on both rosters. In response, the league and individual arenas overhaul their security protocols, mandating buffer zones between players and fans, stricter alcohol regulations, and enhanced crowd control measures. The incident marks a turning point in NBA policy, permanently altering how the league approaches player-fan interaction and public relations during live games. Dwight Howard. In Game 4 of the 2011 Eastern Conference First Round, Dwight Howard, then the NBA's rebounding leader at 14.1 per game, earns 2 technical fouls within 5 minutes of third-quarter action. The first comes after a post-dunk celebration, where Howard briefly flexes and makes eye contact with a Bulls defender. Officials classify the moment as unsportsmanlike taunting under Rule 12a, triggering a technical. Shortly after, a second technical is issued during a brief verbal exchange near midcourt. Because NBA rules mandate an automatic ejection after 2 technicals, Howard exits with 17 points and 8 rebounds, and the Magic trail 66-54. Critics, including multiple former referees, argue the first call is excessive given the playoff setting and Howard's composure. The NBA's post-game officiating review acknowledges the ejection as borderline, though the call is not overturned. Without their all-star center, Orlando struggles to generate interior offense, shoots just 37.8% in the second half, and drops the game 99-82. The loss places them in a 3-1 series deficit, and Chicago eliminates them in Game 5. Howard's ejection adds urgency to ongoing debates around consistency in technical foul enforcement and the balance between emotional play and league decorum. Chris Paul. In Game 1 of the 2018 Western Conference Finals, Houston point guard Chris Paul exits with 23 points and 8 assists after a late-game ejection that triggers immediate controversy. The incident unfolds with under 4 minutes remaining and the Rockets trailing by 6. Paul drives into contact with Sean Livingston, who falls back. Officials call an offensive foul, and Paul's immediate reaction, a terse dispute and wave of the hand, draws a technical. Within seconds, a second technical follows, reportedly for continued dissent, resulting in his ejection. The game ends 119-106 in Golden State's favor. Because Paul is Houston's primary initiator and late-game closer, his absence shifts the game's momentum and reframes the officiating narrative. Head coach Mike D'Antoni publicly criticizes the calls, and fans circulate slowed-down footage online to dispute both the foul and the escalation. The NBA's last 2-minute report, released the following day, confirms 2 missed calls in the fourth quarter, both favoring Golden State. While the report doesn't directly reverse the outcome, it lends weight to accusations of officiating bias, especially with the Rockets alleging a trend throughout the series. Paul's ejection becomes a reference point in debates over emotional expression, referee discretion, and postseason officiating. Rasheed Wallace. During the 2001 NBA season, Portland forward Rasheed Wallace leads the league with 41 technical fouls and 7 ejections, both single-season records under modern officiating standards. At 6'10" and averaging 19.2 points per game, Wallace remains a key offensive anchor for a Blazers team that finishes 50-32. But his frequent clashes with referees become a national talking point. The most notable incident occurs when Wallace receives a technical and ejection not for words or gestures, but simply for staring at an official after a non-call. The referee deems the prolonged eye contact overt intimidation, invoking Rule 12A on unsportsmanlike conduct. The league backs the call and fines the Trail Blazers $15,000 for what it describes as referee abuse, escalating tensions between Portland's players and NBA officials. Wallace, who never speaks during the exchange, avoids suspension but draws widespread media scrutiny. Critics argue the league's disciplinary boundaries have become too subjective, while officials cite a growing need to regulate player reactions. This season catalyzes a broader league effort, later codified in 2006, to formalize ejection thresholds and redefine verbal and nonverbal dissent. Wallace's unprecedented ejection total marks a turning point in the NBA's campaign to control sideline conduct and protect officiating authority. Manu Ginobili. In January 2014, San Antonio Spurs guard Manu Ginobili challenges a full-court pass during a critical possession against the New York Knicks. With 2:10 remaining in the fourth quarter, he intercepts the ball near the three-point line and drives for a breakaway dunk. The shot clears the rim cleanly but strikes the underside of the shot clock, which hangs directly above the glass. Officials rule the play dead, citing goaltending by obstruction, and immediately wave off the basket. Ginobili disputes the interpretation, arguing that the ball had already passed through the hoop before making contact. When he continues arguing past the referee's warning, he receives a technical foul and is ejected from the game. The league's post-game video review confirms Ginobili's claim, the dunk should have counted, and no rule supports the ball's contact with the shot clock after a made field goal triggering a violation. Without his late-game presence, the Spurs, then the defending Western Conference champions, struggled to convert their final 3 possessions and fall 105-103. The controversial sequence, involving both a misinterpretation of equipment interference and an unusually quick ejection, prompts renewed debate around referee training and situational awareness. The officiating error becomes part of a broader trend that season, as incorrect late-game decisions appear in over 22% of last 2-minute reports. The following season, the NBA begins experimenting with expanded video review protocols to mitigate such high-impact errors. Draymond Green. In Game 4 of the 2016 NBA Finals, Golden State forward Draymond Green tallies 15 points, 12 rebounds, and 9 assists in a 108-97 road win over Cleveland. The victory puts the Warriors up 3-1 in the series, setting up a potential championship closeout at home. But the game's defining moment isn't a stat line, it's a fourth-quarter confrontation between Green and LeBron James. As James steps over a fallen Green during a transition sequence, Green swings his arm upward and makes contact with LeBron's groin. Officials assess a common foul during play and allow the game to continue, but the league reviews the incident post-game. After analyzing the footage, the NBA upgrades the foul to a flagrant one and issues a retroactive suspension for Game 5. The decision is based on Green's accumulation of flagrant points. This is his 4th of the postseason, which triggers an automatic one-game suspension under NBA rules. Without Green, Golden State's defensive rotations collapse, and the Cavaliers take Game 5 at Oracle Arena behind James' 41-point performance. Cleveland wins the next 2 games as well, completing the first 3-1 comeback in NBA Finals history. Green's absence becomes a pivotal turning point, cited by analysts as the moment the title slipped from the Warriors' grasp. DeMar DeRozan. In a late-season 2021 matchup between the Chicago Bulls and Philadelphia 76ers, DeMar DeRozan exits the game under unusual circumstances. With just under 3 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter and the Bulls trailing 103-101, DeRozan drives to the rim, absorbs contact, and fails to draw a foul. In immediate frustration, he swings his arm downward in an exaggerated motion, an air punch aimed at no one in particular. The nearest official whistles for a technical foul, citing a hostile gesture, and quickly follows with an ejection. DeRozan, who had scored 23 points on 58% shooting, never makes physical contact or directs profanity toward any player or referee. Despite objections from Bulls coaching staff and players, the league reviews the incident and upholds the ruling the following day. Officials point to the NBA's emphasis on overtly aggressive demonstrations that could incite crowd reactions or escalate tensions. Still, critics note that similar gestures in past games had resulted only in warnings or a single technical. Chicago's offense stalls after DeRozan's exit, scoring just 4 points in the final 2 minutes, and the 76ers pull away for a 110-105 win. The lack of consistency in how hostile gestures are interpreted becomes a point of debate, particularly as teams compete for playoff positioning in a condensed season. The ambiguity of DeRozan's ejection mirrors a growing pattern across the league, setting up a broader conversation with the next case, Tim Duncan. Joey Crawford. Joey Crawford leads all NBA referees in player ejections, recording 88 over a 39-year officiating career. Known for his quick whistle and low tolerance for perceived disrespect, Crawford often inserts himself into high-stakes moments, none more so than in April 2007. During a regular season game between the Spurs and Mavericks, Tim Duncan earns 2 technicals while sitting on the bench, the second for laughing. Crawford ejects him in the third quarter despite Duncan not being on the court. The league investigates and uncovers that Crawford not only escalated the interaction unnecessarily but also challenged Duncan to a fight during the exchange. Commissioner David Stern suspends Crawford indefinitely, citing unprofessional conduct. This isn't Crawford's only disciplinary issue. He's suspended once before in 1998 for tax fraud, and in 2005, he ejects the Portland Trail Blazers mascot, Blaze, for interfering with free throw attempts. Despite numerous controversies, Crawford returns after his 2007 suspension and continues officiating until 2016, when he retires with over 2,500 games worked and 50 NBA Finals appearances. Players and coaches remain split on his legacy. Some view him as a passionate enforcer of league integrity, others as a volatile presence too eager to dominate games. The Duncan incident, however, redefines the boundaries of referee authority and forces the NBA to reevaluate how it trains and disciplines its officials. Crawford's ejection rate becomes a benchmark in debates around officiating power and player protection, setting the tone for how the league handles future disputes between stars and referees. The Rulebook. The foundation for every NBA ejection lies in Rule 12A, a section that defines technical fouls as violations involving overt acts of resentment or abusive language toward officials. Since its adoption in the league's earliest form, the rule has remained intentionally broad, giving referees latitude to manage player behavior. But by 2001, after a spike in on-court disputes and confrontations, the NBA rewrites the language to introduce a zero-tolerance approach, signaling to players that even minor shows of dissent could result in immediate penalties. This move coincides with Commissioner David Stern's broader strategy to sanitize the league's image following the 1990s reputation for physical play and locker room volatility. Therefore, small gestures, staring down a ref, raising a hand in protest, or sarcastically clapping, can now escalate quickly to ejection, depending on how the official interprets intent. In 2010, the league doubles down with its Respect for the Game initiative, targeting what it calls the emotional overreaction gap between players and referees. The program mandates that all displays of disagreement, verbal or visual, be met with faster technicals, thereby increasing ejection risk. 12 years later, the NBA expands its ejection toolkit again by adding the transition take foul to the list of reviewable, potentially flagrant plays, placing even non-hostile infractions under ejection scrutiny. Despite these policy upgrades, enforcement remains inconsistent. One game's shrug is another game's suspension, and players, coaches, and fans alike express confusion about how the same action yields wildly different consequences. This rulebook ambiguity sets the stage for the modern era's most polarizing ejections, none more infamous than what unfolds in Detroit, 2004. Luke Walton. In July 2007, during an NBA Summer League game in Las Vegas, Lakers forward Luke Walton becomes one of the rare veterans to draw an ejection in a preseason environment. After missing a routine layup on a fast break, Walton slams the ball to the floor in visible frustration. The bounce is hard, but it doesn't hit anyone or delay the game. Still, the nearest official interprets the act as unsportsmanlike, invoking Rule 12 as clause on overt resentment and issuing a technical. When Walton reacts with a stunned, "Seriously," the referee responds with a second technical and an immediate ejection, just 5 minutes into the first half. The crowd inside the Thomas and Mack Center erupts with boos that continue for more than 3 minutes, drowning out the subsequent free throws. Since Summer League games are typically used to develop rookies and evaluate fringe talent, Walton's presence is already an outlier. His ejection amplifies scrutiny around how rule enforcement scales across competitive contexts. The league doesn't issue a fine or follow-up explanation, but the incident underscores the growing sensitivity of referees to visible emotion, even in non-essential games. That sensitivity soon extends into the regular season, leading directly into a record-setting year for Rasheed Wallace. Kobe Bryant. In April 2011, during a nationally televised matchup against the Dallas Mavericks, Kobe Bryant draws an ejection after delivering an elbow to the chest of Dante Jones. With 4:36 remaining in the third quarter and the Lakers holding a slim lead, Bryant spins into the lane, collides with Jones, and follows through with a sharp left elbow. Officials immediately assess a flagrant 2 foul, an automatic ejection under Rule 12 as provisions for unnecessary and excessive contact. Bryant exits with 28 points on 10 for 18 shooting, but without his presence, the Lakers' offense stalls. Dallas closes the gap in the fourth and wins 109-100, extending Los Angeles' losing streak to 5 games. The league reviews the play and upholds the ejection, issuing a $100,000 fine to Bryant within 48 hours. Although Bryant defends the contact as a heat-of-the-moment reaction to aggressive defense, league officials cite his history of on-court elbows. Particularly against Jones, who has drawn similar reactions before. The incident prompts the NBA's competition committee to re-clarify guidelines around retaliatory elbows, especially in crowded post-play situations. The revised criteria appear in preseason officiating workshops the following year, emphasizing intent and follow-through over player reputation. The rule tightening feeds directly into the next high-profile case, Draymond Green's suspension altering flagrant in the 2016 finals. DeAndre Ayton. In January 2023, Phoenix Suns center DeAndre Ayton receives one of the season's fastest and most disputed ejections during a second-quarter sequence against the New Orleans Pelicans. With 7:58 left before halftime, Ayton finishes a two-handed dunk over Jonas Valanciunas, then briefly flexes and stares in his direction. Despite no physical contact or prior technical fouls, the nearest official immediately whistles for taunting, citing a violation of Rule 12 as overt act of disrespect clause. Within seconds, Ayton is assessed a technical foul and ejected from the game. The Suns, leading 54-45 at the time, are forced to adjust their frontcourt rotations for the remainder of the night. The decision triggers an immediate backlash. Fans inside Footprint Center chant, "Let them play," for nearly a minute as the officiating crew confers, but the ejection stands. Post-game, the NBA issues a rare clarification, announcing that the taunting technical was rescinded upon review and that Ayton's flexing did not merit ejection under current enforcement standards. The league acknowledges the call as inconsistent with other non-penalized celebrations that season. The controversy contributes to a broader league-wide conversation about subjectivity in taunting enforcement, especially when no warning or escalation occurs. This inconsistency sets the stage for future updates to the Respect for the Game initiative, which continues to evolve as player expressions clash with officiating discretion. Bill Laimbeer. In March 1987, Detroit Pistons center Bill Laimbeer is ejected 3 times in 27 days, including back-to-back games against playoff-bound opponents. At 6'11" and 245 pounds, Laimbeer ranks among the league's most physical defenders, frequently drawing ire for his elbows, undercuts, and deliberate fouls away from the ball. One incident, a full extension shove to Larry Bird's chest, earns a $15,000 fine, while another elbow to Brad Daugherty's throat leads to a $5,000 penalty and league-wide backlash. His repeated infractions push the NBA to clarify ejection thresholds and tighten definitions around flagrant contact. That season, league officials introduce a 2-tier flagrant foul system to better distinguish reckless plays from intentional violence. Because Laimbeer's actions coincide with the Pistons' rise to contender status, the league's disciplinary response becomes part of a broader identity war. Detroit's "Bad Boys" label solidifies during this stretch, as they lead the NBA in team fouls while reaching 52 wins and a conference finals berth. Laimbeer, unfazed by criticism, dismisses the rule changes in interviews, saying, "They're just soft now." His repeated ejections and unapologetic posture highlight the gap between the league's evolving image and player enforcement standards. The league's revised flagrant policy remains in place into the early 2000s, and Laimbeer's reputation becomes a benchmark for policing contact in the modern game. The aftermath. Since 2015, the NBA publishes last 2-minute reports for all games within 5 points at the 2-minute mark, offering transparency on referee decisions during crunch time. These reports aim to clarify whether calls or non-calls in the final 120 seconds conform to official rules. In theory, they reduce speculation and improve accountability. But in practice, they rarely satisfy players or fans, particularly when the outcome hinges on a blown ejection or a missed technical. A referee might be listed as incorrect in the report, yet the result stands, and the impacted team receives no redress. Because of this, the league's effort to promote transparency has not eliminated controversy, it's often magnified it. Players now wear microphones during official reviews, and in some cases, those audio feeds reveal the exact wording that triggered ejections. When the public hears a player mutter frustration or sarcasm without profanity, yet still get tossed, debates spread rapidly across social media. Memes, slow-motion replays, and freeze frames dissect intent frame by frame, often making referees the story. Despite new technology and more data, ejections remain unpredictable variables, especially in late-game possessions where a single player's absence can flip a result. The NBA's next frontier, automated officiating and expanded replay, raises the question, can the human element ever be removed from something this subjective?